Alright fam, well it's time to engage. Mutsa front and center, enter the stage. Mind, body and spirit to try synergy. Ask not like Kennedy, feel the energy. Jump as you live, try to give all positive vibes. Ignite your cognitive senses. The consensus, Mutsa stupendous, tremendous, and kicks like Juventus. Always on point, sharp like a knife, cutting through the bull, tame the strife of life. With no type of hype, don't like take a hike or roll the dice, grab the mic, connect like Skype. No need to save face, it's a safe, real like the rings of Saturn. Full circle, Mutsa is in purple, royalty regal. She's killing you with kindness, it's almost illegal. So my people, life is up and down like a seesaw. Calito, fly away high like an eagle. Watch the leaves grow. Once my flow is flawless, then it's finito.
Okay. I'm here. I made it. This is what shifting your mindset is all about. This just shows you, because I was all prepared to say at 10 p.m. sharp, I'll be live on air. But who knows? Because I have a very, very spiritual person coming on to the show today. So maybe God's trying to send me a message before the show even begins. So I'm actually I'm calm, because like anything in life, I know these things happen. Everything is man-made, as much as I had it all planned out, for the past 2 weeks, I've been waiting. In fact, I think more than that, I've been waiting to have my guest on the show. And I was all ready. Today I was more excited than any other days, but unfortunately life happens. I had a mishap, but I'm here. And the lesson to start with, the shift to start with before we even get in, is the fact that no matter what life throws at you, you don't give up. If you believe in something, if you want something, no matter what life throws at you, you don't give up. So I had an evidence situation, which is what we do right here on Shifting Your Mindset with Mutsa. We bring in real life experiences, real things, the real deal, evidence based, where we have different scenarios, people sharing their real life events, and then we move into the shift. So there you go. I've switched you into the shift. This is my shift that are live, and it is Shifting Your Mindset with Mutsa right here on Diplomatic Radio.
You already know. What up, guys? My name is Brian K. So here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to go and follow Shifting Your Mindset with Mutsa on YouTube, and also follow Shifting Your Mindset on Instagram. Be sure to join her on Diplomatic Radio. It's gonna be dope. You already know.
But anyway, before we waste any time, because I've been waiting for this interview, I've been waiting for this shift, Patience, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Mutsa. It's such a pleasure to be on the show tonight.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, what I usually do is, I usually like to ask people, as you know, it's an unfiltered discussion. If I cross boundaries, you're free to plead the Fifth Amendment. So, back to the show. Are you ready?
Yep, I am. Yeah.
All right. So before we go into the shift, I usually like to know who you are. I've spoken to you vaguely for a few minutes, but today I want to get to know you a bit more than what I know. So if you can give me a bit of background, your full name. I just know you as Pastor Patience, but I don't know your full name. So if you can give me a bit of background, your full name, where you were born, you know, how it was like, etc., and then I'll pick it up from there.
Okay, so my name is Patience. I was born in Zimbabwe, so my maiden surname is Mhlovu. I grew up in the city of Kings called Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. I was raised in Zimbabwe and moved across to the UK 18 years ago. I'm married here to Kingsley, who is from Nigeria, and that's been interesting. We've been married for 11 years now, and we live in Manchester. I currently work at the University of Salford here in Manchester, where I'm a lecturer on the nursing and social work programs. Outside that, I work alongside my husband, who pastors a church here in Manchester. So that's just a brief about me.
All right. Okay. I'll hold the thought about your husband and the pastoring. You said you were born in the city of Kings.
Yeah,
that is powerful, city of Kings. Yeah, which is the second capital city of Zimbabwe, for those that don't know. How was it like growing up in because obviously I'm from Zimbabwe as well myself, but I grew up in Harare. How was it like growing up in Bulawayo, and then growing up there? What was it like? How was your childhood? Any specific things that you remember, things that kept you going? Have you always, what did you have any dreams growing up? What was your journey, you know, from being born in Zimbabwe, your childhood, and then obviously 18 years ago you came here, but before 18 years ago, a little bit of that life, if you can.
So I personally think I had quite a privileged upbringing. The country of Zimbabwe was one of the best countries to ever live in Africa when I was growing up. So I grew up not too long after we'd had independence. I'd gone to school in those days where the infrastructure of the nation of Zimbabwe was amazing. We went to really nice schools, lived in nice areas. We had a really, really, really good upbringing. Of course, there was the other side of what I call the colonial hangover. So for those people who don't know much about African history, because Zimbabwe had been colonized by Britain, it so meant that a lot of what we saw growing up was this whole idea of white privilege, so that the word of being white was synonymous with actually having a good life, a better everything, and that privilege. And so a lot of the young people that I grew up with in Zimbabwe sometimes had those difficulties around negotiating who they were in terms of their race and what it meant. But all in all, I had a really good upbringing. My parents were hard-working people who gave their best to us, and we always felt loved. And that's not to say that we never had challenges as a family, but one thing that continually stayed with us was that we felt loved. In Zimbabwe then, almost almost every single family was Christian. So we never actually knew of any other religion. So from being young, we were always taken to church, and our lives revolved around that kind of atmosphere of going to the church and then being around relatives and school and things like that. Church was a big part of us. And again, the churches were really well organized. So we used to enjoy going. When I was young, I quite enjoyed going to church because there was always lots of stuff going on for the children and the youth ministries, and we'd have camping trips and excursions and things like that. So we really, really had a privileged upbringing.
Right. Okay. That's really, really, it's very good to see that you bring out that dynamic of how, you had what is perceived like as the norm. You had a good upbringing, and it's very, very, very good to know this. And you talk a lot about church. And first of all, first question for me is, do you think the fact that you had a good upbringing influenced who you became? Who has it influenced who you are today? Did it play a big part? Or do you think it was just a stepping stone, but you went through a different journey? Did that align, or did that influence who you've become today?
I think our background obviously has a part to play in kind of developing our mindsets and how we view the world. So everybody has a worldview, how you make sense of the world, how you understand issues around morality, issues around the meaning of life, the origins of life, so all these things. And because I was brought up under that Christian worldview, I guess it was much more easier for me as an adult to then investigate that worldview a bit further. However, I'm not sure that my upbringing has really influenced much of my spiritual life, because I think that's been a personal journey that I had to find, Mutsa. And I'll openly say it, even though I grew up in a home that had the label of a Christian, I don't really believe that I was a Christian until I got to my 20s. So I was taken to church. I liked the church environment. I liked what was going on. It was more so like a cultural thing. You just went to church, but it didn't make me a Christian. Joyce Meyer, one of the more popular tele-evangelists in Christian circles, talks about how if you parked your car inside a church building every Sunday or whatever day of the week, it wouldn't turn your car into a Christian. So it was kind of the same thing as me. I went to church, but I don't think I was a Christian at all until I was in my 20s.
Right. So growing up, it never crossed your mind, despite that, you were raised in a Christian background, and despite the fact that you were taken to church every other Sunday, you went camping, all these things that you described, you were not, there was no sign whatsoever that you would take on the pastoral ministry. Was it just like it was never there? Because I know some people say, they've had their calling. Because like for me, for example, I know for a fact that I've always liked to help people from a very young age. Even in school, some of my high school friends remind me of things that I used to do in high school, and I'll be like, oh, okay. And I can resonate to say, my story is aligned to making a difference, being positive. Did you not feel the same? Did you have any hint whatsoever that you were probably going to follow the pastoral ministry?
No, I think if you told me that as a young person, I would have said certainly not. Are you out of your mind? It never actually occurred to me. But then again, if you had asked me in those years when we were growing up whether I was a Christian, I'd have said yes, with my own limited understanding, which I've since discovered that, the Christianity is not about a religion. It's not about following a set of established traditions, but it's about that relationship. It's a spiritual thing, and it's something that you can't fake it. You either have it or you don't have it. And so the reasons why I know that in those days I was just a church goer, I was not a Christian, is because I got a lot of teachings as a young person. And as a young woman growing up in the church, we were taught the Bible a lot. And even when I went went to school, Mutsa, there was a time that I was in high school, in a Catholic school, where Bible was part of our GCSE subjects, and we studied the Bible. I could quote the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. I could quote them from beginning to end. I knew all of them, and I got an A for my GCSEs in the Bible. But whenever I had a challenge or a problem, none of those scriptures would come up, and that's because they were in my intellect, not in my spirit. So as a Christian, you then have a different pathway. It's a different mindset altogether from being a churchgoer.
Right. Okay. I like the fact that you're mentioning the spiritual side of things, because I always say we're spiritual beings, and sometimes when I speak to people and mention that, we're spiritual beings, or we are in a spiritual battle, it's sometimes to people that don't understand, the spiritual realm. It's difficult for me to explain what I'll be saying. However, you've mentioned it, you've mentioned it several times all over. What is this spiritual journey? What is it exactly like? What do we talk about? Because we know, in physical terms, when we die, we decay, and then it's like we stop breathing. Is the spiritual realm then connected to the fact that after we die, we live on? Is our spirit in another form? Is there another dimension? What do you talk about? Just even besides the biblical terms, as a person, what does it mean being in the spirit for you? Or is it aligned to religion?
So I believe that as human beings, we are tripartite beings, that we live in a physical body, but I believe that your physical body does not constitute the sum total of who you are. So your physical body is sort of like the container that you use to be able to exist on planet Earth. So for example, if somebody goes to the moon, their physical body can't survive on the moon, so they need kind of like the astronauts attire and the spaceship and everything to be able to get to the moon and be able to walk on the moon. And so in a similar way, the way I understand it is that for me to be able to live on planet Earth and be seen in the physical realm and be able to engage with other people who are alive on planet Earth, I need a body. I need a body. The body is my container. The body, when you look at me, when you meet me in the natural, what you see on the outside is not the sum total of me. I have a soul. A soul is the seat of your intellect, so your mind, your reasoning capacity, and then your emotions. Your emotions sit in the regions of your soul. Your emotions, your will, which I believe that is one of the gifts that God has given to us as human beings, the capacity to exercise our will, to make decisions, to be able to choose between, one thing or the other, decide that this is the way I'm going and not that way. So exercising our will, I believe all that is in the region of the soul. But above that, I believe also that we have a spirit side of us. We are spirits, who have a soul, who live in a body. And that's why there are times when you just have knowings that you haven't got that information from the natural realm. Nobody's told you about it, but you have a knowing that you cannot explain intellectually. And I believe that emanates from the region of our spirit.
Wow.
And so, it is our spirit that should actually dominate our lives on planet Earth rather than going from the physical backwards, because I think a lot of times when we live out of the natural realm, what happens is we sort of get overwhelmed by challenges and things that come our way because we're just on a plane of the physical realm, and we're not actually tapping into that transcendent part of us. When we talk about transcendent, we're talking about something that is beyond the range of physical human experience. So it's beyond the natural realm. You can't explain it in a natural manner. You've got to be able to tap into that and experience it to be able to know what it means.
Wow. I have so much I had so many questions. I don't even know which one to pick right now. But I can certainly resonate, with the fact that you say sometimes when we tap into the physical. So, for example, like, I had these technical issues before the show. My physical element was like, this is too much, but something within me was saying, you can overcome this. This is just a technical error. Sort it out and make it happen, unless we reach a point where we need an engineer to come in and whatnot, right? So I get that. But then, and I like the fact that you're also a lecturer, so it makes me believe that you've also got that physical, because I have non-believers who listen into the show, and I'm hoping to help somebody, not to say I want them to be Christians, but to at least understand a certain element about spiritualism, right? So you've mentioned that. So from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the body is a vessel. And the spirit is,
I see it.
okay, and the spirit is actually who we are as people, right?
Yeah.
Before okay, so the soul, okay. So is the soul and the spirit the same thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
So the soul, in my understanding, is your mind, the region of your intellect, and your emotions. So, whether it's a positive emotion or a negative emotion, all that's in the region of our soul, our emotions. And also in the region of the soul is where we exercise our will, where you make your decision and you make up your mind about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And human will is very important. Nobody should violate your will. Everything you do should be about you making up your mind and deciding that this is what I want to do. Your spirit is that other part of you that is able to connect on a bigger plane, with that transcendent realm that I'm talking about, that is beyond the natural experience. So in a transcendent manner, this is where you begin to engage things like the emotion of love. You cannot actually put your finger on it, but you know how powerful as a force it is. You can't put a finger on it. You can't quantify it, but you know when you found it, because it's transcendent. It's not about the realm of the physical, even though there are many different types of love, and some of those types might be a physical love, but there are some that can't be explained. They're not based on what people will get out of you. Even if you were mean to them, they still love you. The love between kind of parents and their children, or that love that is unconditional. Nobody can explain why it's there. Where is it coming from? I believe that such things remain in the domain of the spirit realm.
Wow, that is powerful. That is so powerful, because that says a lot, because sometimes we have situations where people are in relationships, toxic relationships, and you think to yourself, are you normal? Why are you tolerating this? Why are you taking this? And you can't figure it out. You can't put a human factor to it to say, well, I'm actually like this, I feel like this, but you can't explain it. So now that you've mentioned this, it's making sense to me personally. I don't know about other people. It's making sense, because there are situations in my human life, in the body, where I've seen certain things, but I can't explain why I'm doing certain things, because obviously it's in the spiritual realm. And if it's in the spiritual realm, which means there's a way I can connect with my spirit. Now back to you. When did you start to understand the spirit realm? And what made you understand? When did you have that epiphany? What was that experience where you thought, oh my God? Because you've mentioned, although you went to church every Sunday, you were not a Christian in any way or form, or you were not spiritual. You were not there. What triggered you? What was the trigger point for you to understand the spirit realm, or to understand that we have this triangulation that you've mentioned? What was it?
Yeah, for me, just like a lot of other people, it was pain, suffering, where you find yourself in a situation where all the resources you have in the natural realm are not enough. They can't help you. You are in a position where you can't get help in the realm of the natural. And for me, it became really worse when I moved over from home to the UK. I found myself disconnected, disjointed, struggling, having a lot of difficulties, and just not being able to pinpoint one single thing that was going right. Everything was really a mess. Very, very difficult, very challenging. A fish out of water. You've come from a country where you were comfortable, you had family, you had people around you, and all of a sudden your status has taken a nosedive. You're sort of like a second-class citizen when you migrate, and things were really, really hard. They were really tough. I remember once just being in a terrible state that I couldn't sleep at night. I'd lay down on the bed and it would be morning and I wouldn't have slept a wink because I was in such a state in anxiety. Things were really difficult. I'd go into Manchester then in the town centre, and I remember once going into one of these little Tesco Express shops.
Yeah.
So it's like a little supermarket that you can go in, convenience shop, and I go in there and I pick up a basket and I start filling things in, but I am looking at myself as if I'm outside of my body. So I can see myself doing those things, but I'm completely disconnected to myself. And I load the basket and I can see myself walking in this daze. And I walk past the checkout tills and I get out of the shop with that basket and all the things. And, the alarms are going off, obviously, because it's like somebody stolen stuff. I heard the alarms, but I didn't wake up. I carried on walking to the bus station, to go and get a bus home. And I seen these security guys running past me. They're running. And obviously they're looking for a person who's probably running, who's taken all these things in the shop. I wasn't even running. I was just walking in a daze. And it so happened that, it was kind of like 5 p.m. rush hour. Everybody's just finished work and they're all rushing about. Somebody dropped a bunch of keys next to me. And when that bunch of keys hit the ground, it was as if somebody woke me up. And I looked at my hand and I was like, how did that basket get there? And I knew that day that I couldn't carry on like that. And I got home and I said, oh, dear God, if you are around somewhere, I need help. I need you to help me. And that's when things started to change for me.
Wow. So did you have like an outer body experience?
I don't think it was. I think it was just trauma. And a lot of people are like that. When they go through a lot of trauma, they experience what psychologists call, dissociation, where they're looking at themselves from the outside. They don't associate their physical body with themselves. It's like your soul is standing outside and looking at you like you're walking in a daze. You can't quite handle the amount of things that are coming your way. And so you dissociate yourself from your experience and stand outside of it to try and somehow survive the challenges.
Wow. So trauma can make you have these hallucinations where you're so disconnected and you can't explain it yourself, but you feel like you're not here.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So
like
you
sleepwalking.
Right. Do you know what? That I've had very good moments of that, so I understand what you're saying, and I'm reaching out to somebody because I know, especially in the pandemic that we are in, there are people that are isolated, people that are on their own, and you kind of feel disconnected to the world, and you can't figure out what's going on. This is one of the scenarios, and sometimes it's a kind of trauma or psychological trauma, but you don't actually understand, because as human beings, have you found, like you're mentioning that it got to that point because obviously it piled up? Why is it difficult as human beings why is it so difficult for us to seek for psychological help? Why do we always think, it's okay if you have a toothache, it's okay if you have an earache, if you have a headache, to go and say, you know, I need help. But it's so difficult for us as human beings to actually go in and say, look, emotionally, I need something because I'm not okay. Why is it? Because obviously you got to a point where it was too much. Do you know what I mean? It got to a breaking point where you were living in a daze. You were leaving, you know, but you were no longer alive. You were leaving, but you were no longer alive. You know what I mean? You were alive, but you were no longer leaving. Does that make sense? Yeah, you were actually
existing.
you were existing, but you were not leaving because you've been holding on to that trauma. Did it ever cross your mind to say, at some point before this situation, did it ever cross your mind to say, look, I need to seek help? Or it was never there?
Not quite, because you don't quite know how to articulate it. And I think in my own understanding of it, because now that I'm so many years further from there and I've got a lot more understanding and training, I find that one of the things that we are not very good at, and it doesn't matter which culture you come from, you know, whether you're African, you're European, American, one thing we're not very good at is training our young children from being young into teenagehood, into being young adults. We're not very good at teaching people how to handle the emotional aspects of us as human beings. You know, we're not good at teaching people how to articulate pain that is not physical. That's why, you know, it's like when, for example, children are really sad and they're crying and somebody says, oh, just wipe your tears and here's a chocolate. You know, you silence the pain. You don't even ask them why they're crying. What is it that's hurting? Acknowledge the feeling and teach them how to come out of that feeling. So we're not trained, but we're trained to be physical. And so that's why even when you find young children and young adults as they grow up, if they've got emotional pain, they'll give it a physical symptom. So, for example, somebody is a young adult, they've had a painful breakup, their boyfriend's dumped them or whatever, and they're heartbroken. Rather than saying, I am heartbroken, my heart is in pieces, I feel this like strange sensation in the pit of my stomach, people will say, I've got a headache, I don't feel well, I need to lie down, because they've not been taught the language of expressing and articulating emotional pain. It is much easier to talk about physical pain rather than mental pain, because that's how we've been brought up, that's how we've been trained, you know. And I find now that when you retrain people and you train them and you open their minds to understanding that we're not just physical beings, but we're emotional beings as well, and our emotions need attention, they need healing, they need sorting out, it's different then.
That is amazing. That is amazing. This is what I call the shift, because what you have just articulated right there is a most powerful thing that I think as humanity right now, you know, we look at the world, it's in chaos. The world is dark right now because I think we're driven more by the physical. When we try and address our emotional inabilities, the things that set us back, we are more emotionally driven beings, and yet we want to underestimate the power of emotion. You know, we are more emotionally driven beings, because the trauma that's most likely to follow you in your life is emotional trauma than physical trauma. Not saying I'm undermining one way or the other, but an emotional trauma can influence who you become as a person, who you become as a being. And what you're articulating, especially for the men, shout out to our men right now, when they try and express their emotional side, even as women, I find it difficult, you know, when say, for example, we're talking about relationships and you want to express yourself to say, you know what, I'm not too good because this is what happened in a relationship. We're so quick to say, you know what, girl, this person's done you wrong, you need to walk away from it. We don't address the ability of healing emotionally, because that will open up doors. And it took me years to understand that concept of healing emotionally, and that there is nothing wrong because we are spiritual beings. And I am very, 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 like, I'm so happy that, you know, I don't know if other people haven't understood this, but you have mentioned a very important thing that I think is lacking in communities today. You look on social media, you look in society, there's a lot of chaos. You know, there's a lot of squabbling, there's a lot of dysfunctionality in there, and we embrace that because we don't understand the emotional language, which is aligned to the spiritual realm that we are speaking about. But I'll come to that in the shift. I want to ask the question. Sorry. You said the day you walked out of Tesco with the bag and you were in limbo. You know, you didn't. It's like you were not there, but you were there. You went and had a conversation with God and said, you know what, I've had enough, or I need help. You know, I need help. Was it because you felt more secure to speak to God, or was it because you were alone because of your circumstances, being in a foreign land, or was it because that's what you knew from being raised in a Christian home?
I think it's literally because I had nowhere else to turn. And I think that experience is not unique to me alone. I've heard of some people who were not brought up in any Christian home, but when they found themselves in a dark pit that they couldn't climb out of, and they knew that nobody around them was going to be able to help, that at that time they had to shout out into the realm of the spirit, you know, not even much expecting an answer, but God's answers. And so for me, that day was a day of desperation, you know, because I needed that help. And this is where you know, my walk with God has really kind of changed my life, because, you know, from that day I said that you see how things, you know, are put in place for you at the right place at the right time, and you can see your journey being sort of led by an invisible hand, so that the good, the bad, the ugly, the in between, they all converge together to form the person that you're meant to be, to train you up in the things that, you know, are part of your destiny, the things that you need to do. And so that training doesn't come from necessarily going to university, but it comes from the school of life, you know, and everybody goes through life, and life's going to hit you with some things. And when those things converge, you know, the natural realm's not going to be enough. You're going to need to be able to tap into a higher power. And that's what happened for me. And so when I did that cry out, then God helped me. You know, the next minute was, you know, I just met a friend of mine that I knew actually from Zim many years ago. And she says to me, we've got a conference at our church. Would you like to come and visit? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to come. And that's how it started. I go to that conference, and it was like mind blowing. It was completely different from anything I'd ever experienced as a young woman. And from that day, I encountered a different dimension. So I've talked before about us being spirit beings. But, you know, when I came into Christianity, my spirit got a dose of a different power, you know, which in Christianity we understand to be the Holy Spirit. But from that day, I had an encounter with a different power. Everything changed, Mutsa. I see differently. I have access to information that I wouldn't normally have access to. I dream vivid dreams. I see things that are beyond explanation, you know, and I get kind of like divine help. And that all came about for me from that encounter with God, and me making up my mind, you know. It was an act of my will. Nobody's coercing me. Nobody's saying, come, you've got to go to church. You've got to do. No, it was my decision. Me exercising my will and making up my mind that I was going to start this new journey.
Wow. I've got so many questions on that aspect, on when you finally tapped into that divine power. But I'm going to take a quick break because we're moving into the shift, because I think there is so much that's going to come out of what you're going to explain, which is the shift. And I'm like, the things that you're saying now, I understand. So for me, I'm also a Christian, and you know, I also have my gospel shows on Sunday, and and because I believe in God. And now I'm starting to because I'm a spiritual being myself, I'm starting to understand why I face so many hiccups before the show started, because the conversation that you're having with me is one of the most powerful conversations, you know. It's important we understand ourselves as spiritual beings, but it's not something that is forced in you. But I want to take a quick break and then come back. You know, all that glitters is not gold. Life is a journey, and you have to be a fighter. Conversations I usually have when you shifting your mindset are unfiltered conversations. People never know what I'm going to ask them. And my parents divorced when I was very young, so I don't really know what it's like to live with my dad, but me and him have a decent relationship. So I'm going now to the encounter you had. You were invited to the church conference. You went to the church conference. Did it feel right for you being there? Did it feel like you were in the right place?
Yes, absolutely. So I grew up in an Orthodox church. It was very boring, very dead. You know, you never saw anything of the Bible coming alive. It was as if all these things are just told stories. It's not what happens in real life. And then I go to this church in Manchester, and it's a demonstration of a higher power. If people are sick, they get healed. You know, if people have a problem, they get a breakthrough after prayer. So I suddenly found myself in a highly charged environment where the Bible comes alive. It's no longer just words on a paper, but it's actually something that is spiritual. You know, there's something in the Bible that is powerful. So I found myself in this environment, and very quickly I began to experience a different life, you know, from what I had. And one amazing thing about being in that environment was that all those things that were a problem, they suddenly diminish, you know, and all that anxiety, it diminishes, you know, it goes, it disappears. You can't even pinpoint what day did it all check out. All you know is that, you know, the sky is much more bluer, it's brighter, the sun is shining in a kind of deeper way, everything is wonderful, you feel this joy bubbling up inside of you, you laugh for no good reason, and it's just, you can't pinpoint what is it exactly that happened. And for me, that's the place where my spirit has an encounter with the Spirit of God, and I get charged up in the Spirit, so that whatever's happening in the natural realm becomes subservient to my spirit. So if my spirit is charged up, it doesn't really matter what is happening in the natural realm. So whether there's COVID or whatever, I am still able to function and live well and enjoy my life.
Wow. So basically you're saying once we master how to conquer our spirit, once we understand the spiritual realm, we'll be able to overcome some of the difficulties or the challenges we face as human beings.
That's what I believe, Mutsa. What I've seen is that when I was growing up in Zimbabwe, you know, I was so ignorant about the spirit realm. I thought it never existed. I thought all there was to life, you could see it, you could touch it, you could taste it. And obviously that's ignorance. And that's was one of the reasons why I had a lot of problems, because I wasn't cognizant of the fact that there are forces that you're not always going to be able to see with your physical eyes. So, you know, there are natural laws that exist, and there are also spiritual laws that exist. And when you violate natural laws, you get a consequence. If you violate a spiritual law, you get a consequence. And I'll give you a quick example. So let's say, for example, I go to the highest building in the nation. I take a lift and go right to the top of the building, whatever, how many stories that building is. Let's say I stand at the top of that building, and then then I decide, you know what? I'm not going to go back down with a lift or with stairs. I'm going to just walk off the top of this building. You know, I could decide to do that. But what's going to happen is, as I walk off that building without a parachute or any sort of implement to help me, the law of gravity is going to send me down to the pavement at such neck-breaking speed that I'm going to get hurt. And I'm going to wake up, if I wake up, or I'm going to be translated into eternity, you know. But when I get up, I can't argue with the law of gravity. That law exists. If you don't acknowledge it, it doesn't stop working. You know, whether you acknowledge it or you don't acknowledge it, there is a law of gravity which says you can't walk off a tall skyscraper without parachutes or something. In the same way, in the spirit realm, there are also natural laws that you can't afford to ignore them, because if you ignore them, it doesn't change their existence. And if you violate those laws, it doesn't change the consequences that are going to come to you, whether you knew about that law or you didn't. So a basic example of a spiritual law is the law of sowing and reaping. And that law says you will reap what you sowed. So let's say I want to be happy. I want to be full of joy. If I want to be happy and full of joy, I cannot afford to sow seeds of bitterness, resentment, anger, unforgiveness, hatred. If I sow all that, there's no way I am going to reap joy. If I want to have joy in my life, I've got to sow the seeds that are going to give birth to joy. And these are the spiritual laws that I'm talking about, Mutsa.
You're powerful. One of the listeners said as well that you're powerful, because this is one of the most educational things. I mean, we miss it. We are quick to give lessons on things that we see, you know, things that are in the norm, things that we understand, things that we can touch. But what we don't understand is when we die, you know, this body decays, but it's because the soul maybe would have left, or the spirit would have left. There is an aid to the soul, to the body that you have. There's an aid. Does that?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Am I understanding it correctly from what you're saying? The soul and
spirit,
the soul, the spirit is an aid to the body. This is why when the spirit is an the body is an aid to the spirit. Okay. And this is why when we die, the body decays, but the spirit never goes, because the spirit would have left the body. Is that right?
Yes. So when you look at planet Earth where we live, you know, I believe, because of my Christian background, when I read the Bible, I see that planet Earth was not created for spirits to live in, you know, spirits without bodies. It was created for spirits that have a body, you know. So when you have a body, you are able to live life as we know it on planet Earth. The minute you don't have a body, you can no longer speak to Mutsa or speak to your neighbor or talk to any other person. The minute the physical body dies, your spirit doesn't have a house anymore to be able to do business on planet Earth, you know. So immediately your body dies, your spirit doesn't have a house to be here. So, you know, you can't influence things on planet Earth without a body. And that's why I believe that, you know, in the realm of the spirits, there are different kinds of spirits. I'm not the only spirit alive. You know, you have a spirit, Mutsa. The listeners have spirits. But in the midst of us, there are also other types of spirit beings that I believe would seek to influence we spirits that have a body, because they need a body to be able to carry out their own agendas. You know, a spirit cannot impact the physical realm without a physical body.
Right.
And so I believe that as a person who is spirit, soul, and body, my spirit has impact on my body, but the only way my spirit can have impact on my body is to go via my soul, which is my mind, my will, my emotions. And then my soul downloads it to the physical body now. So when you talk about the mind is transcendent, but the mind influences your physical organ called the brain. And that physical organ called the brain influences the different parts of your body. So like right now I'm speaking because my body is doing something which is causing my mouth to move and words to come out of my mouth, you know. And
But
what I'm speaking is in my brain, but it's come from my soul.
Oh, yes. It's coming from, so okay, so the body is like just a transporter. It's a shell.
Yeah.
It's a shell. It's a shell that functions. So now I want to touch on the concept that we all try and avoid, death, right? So you're saying Earth is made for, you can only be on Earth if you have the transporter, if you have a body. But ultimately, if you don't, there also still those spirits that linger, that try and influence you and, to try and get your body. What happens then when you get to that point of death where your body no longer exists? What's that point, do you think?
Yeah, so as a Christian, I believe that there are different types of bodies. So, for example, I believe that there are some beings called angels, angelic beings. Those angelic beings are not just a spirit, they also have a body, but their body is a different type of a body, it's a spiritual body. It's a body that can travel, go to Mars, go to Jupiter without needing, a shuttle flight sent by NASA. So I believe that as a Christian, when I die, this physical body that can dwell on planet Earth, it goes into the ground, but my spirit and my soul don't die. My spirit and my soul don't die, and they wait, for the day when I will be given a new body, which we call resurrection. I'll be given a new body, and that new body is like an angelic body that is no longer limited by time and space. It's that body that doesn't need a spacesuit. It's that body that's not limited. It's that body that can walk through a wall. It's that body that is not limited by the laws of nature and the laws of planet Earth.
Right.
So I believe there are different types of bodies.
Okay. So just speaking on that, so does that mean that from what you understand on a Christian perspective, I want to speak on death because there's a lot of deaths happening right now, and I'm not sure if it will be any comfort to people, but it's happening right now, and people are, it's a sad time, it's a dark time in the world, and I believe there's a spiritual battle happening right now, but that's another story. But do you believe then when your body or your transporter dies, it's time? It means you've served. So are we born with the purpose as human beings? Were we given this body? Were our spirits and our souls given the opportunity to have a transporter for a purpose? Is that right?
I believe that, Mutsa, from the bottom of my heart. I believe that, and the Bible teaches me things like, when I was being formed. So when you read, there's a book in the Bible called the Book of Psalms, which means a collection of songs. And in one of those songs, Psalm 139, it talks about how God formed my being. Even while I was still in my mother's womb, he looked at me and he knew who I was going to be. He knew the purpose I'd fulfill, and he looked at all the days of my life before I ever lived them. And it says that he had these thoughts about me, which are very wonderful thoughts, that he even wrote down in a book. Like, I have a book of destiny. And I believe that for every single person who's born on planet Earth, you have a purpose, you have a destiny. There is a specific destiny. There's a specific reason why you were born. And that means that our lifespan on Earth is not going to be exactly the same as each other, because our purposes are different. I know some people who, at their death, when everybody else thought, wow, they died so young, it's so sad, but their death impacts the lives of people so much that at their death, a lot of people have spiritual encounters, their lives are transformed, their families are changed for good, and they sort of have this wonderful legacy that lives after them. And so even in their death, they still have impact, and they have impact for generations to come. And so I believe that our lifespan doesn't necessarily say, it doesn't mean that if you live to be 120, your own destiny and purpose was better than the person who died as a baby, or those who died as children, or those who died as teenagers. But I believe that each and every one of us has a specific purpose, and that purpose will be achieved one way or the other.
Whew. Now this is what I call shifting your mindset, and what you're saying is very powerful, because we question God in times when we lose our loved ones. Death is never an easy thing, and especially in the time that we're living in, where we are seeing so much. Whenever I open my social media right now, it's always like, rest in peace. But it's not easy. How do we get people to get to that point where we understand that when death comes, or when bereavement comes, how do we accept it? How do we understand it? Especially for the non-believers who don't believe in God, who don't believe in resurrection. I mean, I had one question from a listener that has also asked that, do people let me just show you let me just get the question. They asked that, do you believe in resurrection of the dead? There are people that are not Christians, but they're curious. They're people that want to learn, like me as well. I'm not 100%. I'm on a journey. How do we get to comfort people in times when they lose their loved ones, when a newlywed has passed away 3 months after their wedding, when a newborn is born and they pass away, they don't even see life? How do we explain that from your understanding?
Yeah, so from my understanding, Mutsa, I just want to say to the people, who have experienced losses, that, we are very sorry for your loss. And we can never know exactly what you're going through, but we can actually appreciate how challenging and difficult it is, for the people who are going through this bereavement, because it hurts, it's real. And we are talking tonight about actually acknowledging our emotions and not kind of denying them or sweeping them under the carpet, because it's all very normal to feel that way. Now, coming back to, how do you comfort somebody, when they don't believe in the resurrection and they don't believe in this worldview that we share? And that brings me back to what I was saying at the beginning, Mutsa, when I was talking about how I believe in the Christian worldview. And the reason I believe in this worldview, I like to read, I like to investigate things, is because I have investigated it, and it's answered my questions on the origins of life, on morality, on what happens in the afterlife, on destiny and purpose. So this worldview has answered these 4 questions for me. And what I'm saying to the people listening to me is that you need to find something beyond just the natural realm, a worldview, something that helps you to make sense of the world. Because what then happens is, if I comfort you from a Christian worldview and you don't have that belief, it doesn't work, because you get what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, where you are believing one thing and doing another, and it doesn't work. It causes more emotional distress. And so the place of comfort comes from what you believe. What do you believe? And it is in what you believe and what you use to make sense of the world that you're going to get comfort. So a Christian will be limited in comforting a person who doesn't share that worldview, because the assumptions that I make about death and dying will not be the same assumptions that you're making. And so this is where it's important for all of us to actually have a worldview. What do you believe in? And your worldview needs to be able to answer these questions for you. What is the origin of life? Where is life emanating from? What does it say about why I'm here? Why am I here? What does it say about my existence? What does it say about moral issues? What's good? What's bad? And why is it saying that? Once I can answer these questions, then it means that in the day when I face a challenge, I'm in pain and I can't explain my pain, I can lean back on my worldview.
Wow. 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 That is, so it goes down to us as human beings, as for yourself. You need to be able to answer the question for yourself where you stand.
Yes, this is my belief strongly that everybody, whether you want to be religious or you don't, you need a worldview. And that worldview must be consistent. It must tell you, why are you here? Where did you come from? What is the meaning of life? What about your destiny and things? Because if you don't have answers to those things, you will find yourself going through life disconnected, because the physical life, you have very little control over it if you haven't got a worldview. So you will feel like life is happening to you rather than you actually living your life.
Right. Okay. So I want to shift people on that aspect, because that's the shift right now. So you are saying, as a human being, a non-believer or a non-believer or a believer, you need to have a worldview. Why are you here on earth? You need to understand your purpose. Why were you born? Is that
Yes.
right?
Why am I here? What am I doing here? Because unless I can answer those 4 basic questions, I'm going to actually struggle to express myself spiritually. Because when we express ourselves spiritually, we are actually expressing the things that are most important to us, the things that cannot be quantified physically, the things that you can't always have an explanation for, because, like I said, they're transcendent. They're beyond the plane of the ordinary functioning of a human being. And once I'm able to reach that transcendent level, then whatever happens in the natural realm does not throw me, because I have an explanation for it. I have an understanding for it, which I believe, because the root cause here is your belief. If you don't believe, you don't believe anything transcendent. You just believe that, it's natural life and nothing else. Then when that natural life ends, you need to be able to have an explanation for what happened there and what's the next step.
Right. So that is a powerful shift. As a human being, to the listeners that are listening today, as a human being, ask yourself the question today: why are you here? Why were you born? And until you can answer that question, is what Pastor Patience is saying, until you can answer that question, you have not entered the worldview. Because, Pastor, it's a very very difficult question to answer, because sometimes I used to be one of those people where I would say, why am I here? And I would say, I don't know, it's just a process of life. How do you answer that question?
Well, I'm a teacher, and I believe in people reading and researching. So I think, the modern day human is very privileged, because there's a lot of information out there. If you want information, you can find it. This is where you need to research. You need to read. You need to actually say, right, what does this worldview say? Okay, let's say Christianity. Let me investigate Christianity. What are they saying? Is there any evidence for what they're saying? Does it make sense? Is it logical? If it's logical, then I'll go with it. If it doesn't make sense and it doesn't add up, then I'll bin it. So you need to investigate for yourself. This is where it's important to read, to investigate. Don't throw the worldview out without investigating it. And don't go off what other people are telling you, because usually what people are telling us is a diluted, adulterated version, watered down version of whatever worldview. They've added their own traditions, their own limitations, and they've cooked it up the wrong way. So you need to investigate these things for yourself. For me personally, Mutsa, I have found that, because I like to read, when I first, started this walk with God, when I first believed that, right, I'm on a journey with Jesus, with God, I started reading the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, investigating what was being said there. And I have actually, in latter years, read science, and science helps me to understand the Bible, and the Bible helps me to understand science. So when I see things in the Bible, and then I hear science telling me something, and it adds up and it makes sense, it strengthens my belief. So I'll give you an example. So, for example, in the Bible, it talks about, in the book of Romans chapter 12, it talks about renewing your mind. It says renew your mind. Why do I need to renew my mind? Because from the day I was born, I've been told a lot of wrong stuff. I've been told a lot of things that are not right. I've built the wrong mindset. Sometimes I've built a mindset of an inferiority complex, or I've built a mindset of fear. I've been told things that weren't accurate because people didn't always understand who I was. And so when I come into this realization and I come into a relationship with God, I need my mind to be renewed so that I begin to think exactly how I ought to think for a person with my destiny. For me to be able to achieve those things that I'm on planet Earth to do, I need to think a certain way. So I need my brain to function differently. And that literally means my physical organ, the brain, needs new pathways. There are some pathways that need to become redundant. So I read that in the Bible, and then I go and read neuroscience. And neuroscience tells me the same thing, but in neuroscience it's called neuroplasticity. It is the capacity of the adult brain to form new synaptic connections. So neuroscience tells me that I can retrain my brain. I can make my brain different. I can build new pathways in my brain so that my brain begins to function with the understanding of what I want. I can tell my brain every day by the things that I feed my brain can change. I renew my mind. So for me, science tells me a lot that I see in the Bible, and the Bible teaches me to understand science more.
Wow. So for you, you are confirming that you cannot separate. They work hand in hand. So the things that you read in the Bible, they're then confirmed by science, which is then understood in the physical. Because I think one of the questions that one of the listeners had said, how do we get to educate the non-believer? But then again, you say that it's a journey. For you're a person, and how I can explain it in simple terms for those that are listening, life is about growth. Basically, when Pastor Patience is speaking about neuroscience and how you renew, that's growth. If I'm to say it in terms, the human terms that we understand, you're born as a baby. And I always tell this to people, you're in an embryo. You start as a zygote, and then embryo, and then you grow, you become a being. And then from being a being, you grow old. You get born, you start to have teeth, you start learning how to walk, you crawl, you learn how to walk. Sometimes you don't, but ultimately your years keep adding up, because that's growth in life, and that's science now, right? But then from what you are explaining, you then back it up, because all these things that I am explaining, they're actually there in the Bible. So when you start to read the Bible and it tells you certain things, and then you come back to humanity, to the non-believer, to Scientology, and you look at neuroscience, it also says the same thing.
Yes.
Wow. Never in my life had I ever met somebody that has ever explained to me that you can actually back up the Bible with science. This is the first time I'm being shifted, because where I used to battle was where I would like to separate the two, and I would battle. I'll be like, but science is saying this. Science is not proving that there's reincarnation. Because another listener asked that, how do you explain now? Is there something in science that can back up the fact that when the body decays, the spirit lives on? Or now that's where Christianity plays a part?
Yeah, so I haven't seen any research around that area, but as always, I'm always ready to learn and read up more. The only things that I have heard and that have been recorded in some of the kind of psychiatric reviews and in places like that is the idea of people who maybe went for a period of time being diagnosed as clinically dead, and then for some reason they come back to life. And all the time when these people share these experiences, they will always describe being able to see their so-called dead body on the operating table or on the bed or whatever it is. And they can see that they're then able to go through walls and things like that. And they can see that physical container left on the side. Now, they can still know their names. That means they still have their soul intact. They can still experience emotions. That means their soul is intact. And then they can still make sense of things that are not of an earthly nature. They can make sense of their worldview, and that's transcended. So that means your spirit and your soul are still there after your physical body is gone.
Wow. So there is science that can prove people that have had that outer body experience, where people have actually died and they've come back and they've explained what they've seen.
No, I've not seen the scientific research, but certainly the stories that have been collated from people all seem to have a common thread.
Right. Thank you very much for that. I hope that answered your question, listener, and I've had it as well. And how I interpret it myself, and correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I'll go astray. I have dreams. I have very powerful dreams that sometimes scare me. I can have dreams of things that happen in the exact way I would have dreamt of, and those things happen. Now, from a lecturer's point of view, is that some sort of psychosis? Or from a Christian point of view, is that, well, what is it? It's acceptable, but when you try and explain dreams in the bodily terms, people usually think that's non-existent. How do you connect? Because now it's like the link of what you were saying. You combine what you read in the Bible, and then you go and research on it if there are things that you don't understand. So I'm coming to you because I'm hoping you have done more research than me. How do you explain those things?
So, there is research around our dreams, and sometimes it's that capacity for us to sense things, that your brain can pick up signs and messages that you're not always conscious of, but your brain's picked it up. So science comes at it that way and talks about how, physically we have a part of our brain which is called the frontal lobe, and that sometimes we're able to stand outside of ourselves and see things and make sense of things. But I think science is limited in terms of explaining dreams away, because I believe that dreams also sit in that realm of the transcendent. So I have the similar dreams that you have, Mutsa, where you get information that you wouldn't logically have, and you wouldn't say you were thinking about it because it's way out of your experience. Exactly. It's information about somebody else or something that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I'll give you an example. So, some time ago, I had this dream. In the dream, I saw myself getting into my car at the time and driving to work. And in the dream, I get to a specific roundabout. And when I get to the roundabout, I'm conscious that there's going to be an accident. And as I go through the roundabout, somebody joins the roundabout prematurely and hits the car that was 2 cars in front of me. And then it leads to this whole big accident in the dream.
Right.
I wake up in the morning. I take my car on my way to work. At that roundabout that I had a dream about, an accident occurs. But because I had the dream and I'm a Christian, I take my dreams seriously. I pray about them and I'm cautious because of the dream. So because of the dream, I am driving at like 5 miles an hour. And I'm cautious of these cars in front of me because they look like what was in my dream. And I purposely shift lanes. And as soon as I do that, the accident occurs. And all those 3 cars are in a big pileup. And I escape and go to work. I come back home, the next day, I have another dream of the same roundabout. This time, it's a bus and another car. There's an accident. And I drive through that roundabout again. Same thing happens, but I escape because I'm cautious and I've seen the warning. So you cannot tell me that I would have known there was going to be an accident unless I'm receiving information from a spiritual realm.
That's powerful. Because science wouldn't be able to tell you what's in the future.
No.
That's it. I rest my case. It's one of those things that unless and like what Pastor Patience has said, this is a journey that you take as an individual person. You know, you have to first go back to the basics and ask your question, the world view. Who are you? What are you here for? You know, because this is, do you believe this is just a temporary place? We are on a journey.
Yes, I do believe that.
Right.
I do believe that because even when you look at it scientifically speaking, the earth is broken and it's getting worse every day. I can't see the earth as a planet carrying on for billions more of years. It's broken. It's not working very well. It's sort of rejecting its inhabitants. It's broken. And that's what the Bible explains to me, that the earth is in a fallen state. And so that's why we continue to have hardships, we have sorrow, we have all these challenges, you know, where dying is no longer a problem because it's escaping the harsh realities of planet Earth and being able to enter a different realm.
Right. So you've just described death as something, as it's hard, but have I understood it correctly that, you know, when you die now, you're in a better situation because the earth is struggling right now? It's inevitable that it's not going to last till eternity. Eventually we're all going to perish, you know, because it's not going to last another billion years.
Yeah, so I don't believe we'll perish, but I believe that we're being translated to a different dimension because our spirit and our soul never dies. So that tells me that there is a different reality out there. You know, we're starting a different journey after we exit planet Earth.
Right. That's powerful because I know a lot of people that have seen a lot of bereavement in their life, and then they got to a point where they think there's no purpose, there's no point to life because we're going to die anyway. What will be your advice to people who have that kind of mindset?
Yes, if you're not a Christian, I think the best I can say to you is that your purpose is not always about other people, but it's about you specifically. So why are you here? You know, you're not here to be somebody's child, daughter, son, husband or wife or partner. You are here for a specific purpose. So as painful as it is that the people you love are no longer on the earth realm, that doesn't bring your purpose to an end. So you need to find your purpose and fulfill your purpose. But for the Christian, you know, the Bible talks in 2 Samuel chapter 12 about a person called David. So David has an affair, you know, he has an affair and he has a child out of that affair. And then the child gets really ill, you know, and then when the child is ill, the Bible says he fasts and he cries, you know, he's praying, asking for that child to live. Yeah. And then when the child dies, he stops the fast, he stops crying, he gets up and he starts demanding for food. And his servants are like, what is going on? When this child was alive, you were inconsolable. You were in a terrible state. And now this child is dead. You get up, you bath, you eat, you ask for food. It doesn't make sense because this is the time when you should be crying and inconsolable. And, you know, he says to them, you know, when the child was alive, I had hope that they could get healed and get better and live. But now that they're dead, why would I fast and cry? I can't bring them back again. I can't bring that child back again. But what I know is that I will go to where that child is eventually. They will not return to me, but I will go there. So we're going to be reunited. There's going to be a reunion. And that's what comforted him. And that's what I believe as a Christian.
Can you tell us one, please? I know we're running out of time. Can you tell us something, one thing that you have experienced and you say that was God's hand, please, before you go?
Oh, wow. Where would I start?
One.
Okay, let me tell you one that I believe will be practical and helpful for everybody. So one thing that God did for me, you were mentioning before, Mutsa, about worrying. So I used to be a worrier. I used to worry because I ruminate. I go over things and go over things. But one thing that I've had, which was a spiritual experience for me, is that capacity to let go of things, let go of strong emotions, be able to let go. Let go. There are some people who have hurt me very deeply, and yet I don't feel pain about it. I don't feel angry about it. I just have this peace. And I know that it's not a normal human peace. It's a peace that comes from a different realm. And one other thing that I would say to every listener is that please, 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 if you can take away one thing, is take responsibility for your mind, for how you think. Don't expect your mind to just go on a channel that is full of joy and peace, but expect your mind to actually be programmed by you. What are those things that you're saying on a daily basis? What are the things you're reading? What are the things you're listening to? All these things will help you to program your mind so that you live a life that you ought to be living on planet Earth.
Wow. Wow. Right. Now that is a shift. So ultimately at this point, even on a Christian point of view, you're saying we have been given the free will to decide how we influence our mind at
Yes.
this, right.
You can train your mind. You can tell. Your brain is very busy right now because it's processing a lot of things. It will not concentrate on anything other than those things you underline. So, for example, when you have emotional memories, so let's say somebody made you really, really angry, you went to bed angry, you were angry for a week, you will always remember that incident intensely. So that tells you that your brain remembers what you feed it with. It underlines the things that you are making, you are highlighting to the brain. If you want your brain to remember the correct things, you need to tell your brain. You need to be actively taking responsibility for the thoughts that are going on in your mind. As soon as a thought comes in your mind that you think, oh no, this thought is toxic, don't sit there and entertain it. Immediately shut it down with a thought that's going to be positive, that's going to lead you on the right path. Whatever you underline for your brain, that's what the brain will concentrate on.
Well, need I say much? That's exactly what happened to me before the show started. As you all know, I was running 20 minutes behind today's show because something was happening technical, and but I just say to my mind, I am having this interview. Pastor Patience is going to be on my show tonight, and it happened. So it's true. I can testify on that because it happened to me this evening. It's no joke, honestly. Like I was scheduled to start exactly at 10, and for whatever reason things didn't happen. I had technical issues, which I was at a crossroad where I was thinking, should I stop, should I not? But thank you so much. We have a few more minutes left. What is the biggest message you want to send out there? What is the shift you want to leave people with, Pastor Patience?
So the first thing I want to remind people is make sure that you actually investigate and decide on a worldview. You need to have answers to the deeper things in life, because once you get those answers, it will help you through your journey on planet Earth. The second thing I want us to know is that our soul is very important, and our soul can get wounded, through the experiences, the painful experiences, bereavements, losses, grief, heartbreak, all these things. We cannot afford to ignore them. We need to address it. And if you don't know where to start, this is where you need to get help. Get somebody who understands the journey, or somebody who has the skills and the tools to guide you into that place of getting those soul wounds healed and you being able to stand on your feet. There was something Mutsa mentioned before about physical damage. So if, for example, you break your leg today, none of you would go about saying, be brave, be strong, walk on the leg. You'd actually say, go to the accident and emergency department, get that leg set in a cast or something, get some crutches and don't walk on it until it heals. Same manner with your emotions. When you're heartbroken, when you're wounded, when you're hurt, don't say, I'm going to be strong, I'm superwoman, oh, I'm going to stand, I'm just going to carry on. No, you're going to need to stop and get those emotions attended to. Get your soul healed, and God bless everyone.
Amen. Amen and amen.